I think there's a very valid concern when it comes to Warner Brothers and like the next Hogwarts Legacy. I've heard people bring this up, and initially I was like, I don't know, but the more I've looked at it, and especially after reading like the full transcript from the call that this happened on, I think it's actually, I think it's fair. So specifically, this came out back in November of last year, okay? And specifically, it was part of an earnings call where CEO David Zaslav outlined the company's plans to transform its biggest gaming franchises from traditional console and PC releases into always-on live service games. Very, very weird. He made the comments during his opening remarks to investors in which he referred to several of the company's biggest franchises, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Batman, Mortal Kombat, as $1 billion gaming properties. Developer NetherRealm's Mortal Kombat 1, he noted, has sold nearly 3 million copies since launching in mid-September this year. Our focus, he said, is on transforming our biggest franchises from largely console and PC-based with 3 to 4 year release schedules to include more always-on gameplay through live services, multi-platform, and free-to-play extensions, with the goal to have more players spending more time on more platforms. Initially, my thought with this was that, okay, he says a couple of things very, very precisely. He just says include more. That doesn't mean every single thing they do from now on is going to be live service. So that's not necessarily saying the next Hogwarts Legacy is going to be live service or have live service always on mechanics or elements. So there's the potential for that. Also describes like spending more players spending more time on more platforms. And this sort of doubles down on some of the broader ideas and goals for these executives. Like, I know for us, we might immediately want to just go, oh, their goal is to just milk us for more money. Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. But like, part of the way that this works is that they want to create sort of an ecosystem where you are entrenched in their franchises and where you become a super fan. Like, Harry Potter is a tremendous example of this just in general, because with Harry Potter, like, people are not just fans of Harry Potter. People like make it part of their personality. I remember back when I was in the dating pool, like on Tinder, I remember seeing girls who would put in their personality description, when you have like a sentence to make an impression on somebody, they would put in there, I'm a Hufflepuff. Like, that's part of their personality, is that they describe themselves in the context of this franchise. And that is another level of branding and of brand awareness and consumer connection with a brand that very, very few franchises and brands have ever been able to achieve. And their goal for most of these companies is to get a franchise that players and fans can connect with in that way. Their goal is to have it so you, as a fan of X, want to go to the theme park adaptation of it. You want to read the books with regard to it. You want to see all of the movies. You want to maybe get some merchandise, wear some t-shirts, a sweater, maybe get a bumper sticker or two, and that you're going to talk it up with all of your friends. And when the video games come out, you play all the video games. Like, they want you to be that hardcore fan. And one of the ways they think, and I've realized this with all of these executives from these big companies, they all talk about it the same way. They think that just having players spend more time in these games is going to achieve that end. Like, if you spend 100 hours playing Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, you are significantly more likely to buy merchandise, to go and watch the next movie, to go and do this, this, and this. And they've got you all the more hooked into their ecosystem. And for some people, maybe that's the case. But I think gaming specifically is sort of a weird exception to that rule. I think if you were tracking like the metrics, if somebody watched every single movie in a franchise, yeah, they are probably far more likely to buy merchandise for that franchise, to participate in secondary and tertiary forms of that franchise's presentation to the consumer base. But with video games, people will put 50 hours into a game that they're just kind of like on, or that they think is fine or pretty good. Starfield, I put in many dozens of hours into that game, and I'm like, at the end of it. If they announced a Starfield movie, I would not be jumping at the idea of going to see it. Like, I would not be that excited about it. So I think that there's that, and I think their hope is that if you get super into X game for this franchise and you spend 100 hours playing it, that then you're likely to go and play the other game that's live service that's in that same franchise. And it really is it betrays the fact that so many of these executives have no idea how gamers think or work. And I think the green lighting of a lot of these live service projects are prime examples of it, where they think honestly that if you love like Naughty Dog games, you are just going to go and play the Naughty Dog MMO and spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on microtransactions and cosmetics in it. Or if you're really into Rocksteady and you love the Arkham games, you're going to go and really, really love their Suicide live service game, the Suicide Squad live service game. And that's not a given. Like, players are more complicated and nuanced than I like this, therefore I'll play everything remotely related to it. It just really, I think, shows how little they think of their own customers' intelligence and complexity. Like, they really do think, if you like this thing, we'll just make a sort of rewrapped version of it that looks vaguely similar, but is something totally different. And you're going to gobble it up and give us money. And then you see them lose hundreds of millions of dollars on these projects, you know, that it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know, Luke, COD fans be like that. Well, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. But that's perhaps another example of this, is that they think gamers as a whole are willing to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on, like, I guess it's not FIFA anymore. It's like a fighting or football championship, whatever. But like those, the football games, the like Madden games, Call of Duty, all of these games they generate billions of dollars in revenue through microtransactions. And these executives look at them and are like, those are gamers. So gamers like video games. If we make any video game and put that stuff in it, they will buy it because they bought it with Call of Duty. They bought it with a football championship. They bought it with this and this and this. And it's just not the case, you know? Disco Tech, you nailed it. Players just want to be leveled with. When you tell us we need to spend money, cool. When you gaslight us with quadruple A experiences or triple A or quadruple A games with less features than a 10-year-old title. Yeah. Well, and I think that's why the transparency can be respected. If you come out and you're like, hey guys, we're making a Dune MMO survival game. That's what we do. It's what we do. And it's going to be great for people that like these kinds of games. If they're clear with that, okay, there's no false expectations. I'm not going to get into it. I'm not going to be excited for it because it's just not my type of game. Okay, we're cool. But what inevitably happens with some of these projects, like Suicide Squad, again, is a great example, is that they sort of pitched it as a narrative game for a long time. And then when they started to pitch it as a live service game, everybody lost their minds and were like, oh, wait, this is not what we want. You just zip around shooting glowing purple zits. This is not what we wanted. And then they back out of it and they're like, oh, no, just kidding. It's actually we're actually totally serious about this being a narrative game. And they kept comparing themselves to the Arkham games and being like, yeah, we actually are the same guys that made Arkham Knight and Arkham City. And you can expect the same level of narrative depth that you got in those games, but here. And they kept saying, like, we have more cutscenes in Suicide Squad than any game we've ever made, completely ignoring the fact that the game is only about 10 hours long and has like 2 hours of content that's just repeated over and over again. But that's part of the betrayal that people felt. Like, I really do believe with so many of these games, they would be far more successful if they just didn't overhype it, because hype makes people stupid. It makes them put blinders up. And there is no rage as powerful in the world as a gamer scorn. There is nothing that potent. Like, nothing. If players feel like you lied to them, if players feel disappointed and betrayed, you will never hear the end of it. Never, ever, ever. Like, maybe with some movies, you might be able to get away with it, or people will go see it just for the memes or something. But gamers do not work that way. They really, really don't. And that's why I think like these companies that misadvertise or just conveniently fail to mention certain things, they end up suffering pretty devastating rebukes as a result of it. Perhaps unfortunately, perhaps not. All of this to say, I think there's reason to be concerned about Warner Brothers franchises specifically because it seems like they are getting desperate for some bangers. There's no way they are so stupid to not be aware that one of the core reasons why Hogwarts Legacy was successful was because it was antithetical to everything wrong with modern quadruple A game development. It was just a straight up single player game with a solid story, solid enough, and a really fun gameplay loop and lots of things to explore in a franchise that lots of people knew and love. And that's all it was trying to be. And it did that very well. It knew what it wanted to do, and it did that very well. And that's why people connected with it. That's why. If they had ham-fisted all these other live service elements into it, if they had tried to turn it into a live service game by itself, I don't think it would have been anywhere near as successful. But my worry is, especially after a lot of these discussions and a lot of these things that have been said by like the executives, that they are just going to look at it as another potential cash cow. If they can turn it into another live service game for the sequel, then they're going to do that. And I really hope that's not the case. Time will tell, but they cannot be so stupid as to think they can just take Hogwarts Legacy, turn it into a live service game for the sequel and expect it to do well. But I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see. We know they have a couple of Warner Brothers projects in the works that are not live service games. The Wonder Woman game is a great example, where Wonder Woman was allegedly a live service. People were talking about it because there was a job posting that somebody made that somebody found on LinkedIn, I think it was. And they're like, look, they're hiring for online coding engineers, network engineers, whatever. And therefore Wonder Woman is going to be a live service game. And they came out actually specifically to debunk that. And they said, nope, it's a single player game using the Nemesis system. That's all it is. We're not a live service game. We're not a multiplayer or whatever. It's a single player game. Don't get it twisted. And I think that is very good to hear. But I hope that is not the last of its kind.
He took my thing.